At 6, the Prime Minister sacks Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor and replaces him with Jeremy Hunt, the 4th Chancellor this year. Liz Truss announces another major U-turn on her economic plans. A rise in corporation tax will now go ahead.
It is clear that parts of our mini-budget went further and faster than markets were expecting. So the way we are delivering our mission right now has to change.
It is all change for Kwasi Kwarteng, who has had to wave goodbye to his job after just 38 days as Chancellor. The former Health Secretary and leadership candidate, Jeremy Hunt, is now tasked with bringing the financial turmoil under control. What can he do?
Well, he'll hope things can get better. The Prime Minister has now junked 2 key planks of her programme for government and her Chancellor. The big question tonight, can she survive?
Also on the programme tonight, police investigating the murder of teenager Leah Croucher say a convicted sex offender who died 3 years ago is the murder suspect. The faces of some of the children and young people who've been killed in protests sweeping Iran. We have a special report. And the Harry Potter and Cracker actor Robbie Coltrane has died at the age of 72.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, hailed as the most inclusive rugby league event ever, we bring you all the build-up to the World Cup ahead of tomorrow's opening game.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. Less than 24 hours after Kwasi Kwarteng insisted he was 100% safe in his job as Chancellor, he has gone, sacked by Liz Truss after he flew back early from Washington. 3 weeks of turmoil on the financial markets has culminated in this, another dizzying day in politics. The Prime Minister has announced a second major U-turn on her economic plans for growth. Corporation tax will now rise from 19% to 25% in April after all. Liz Truss has sacked the Chancellor and named a new one, Jeremy Hunt, the 4th this year. At a very short press conference this afternoon, she was asked about her credibility as Prime Minister and why she was remaining in the job. She sidestepped those questions, but said repeatedly she was there to ensure economic stability. Well, let's go straight to our political editor, Chris Mason, in Westminster.
You may just have noticed that politics has skipped along at quite a pace in recent years. Well, here's the thing. It's getting quicker, a lot quicker. Very quickly, a new Chancellor became a former Chancellor. Huge chunks of a prospectus for government were binned, and now hovering in the air throughout Westminster, huge questions about the Prime Minister's future too. Turning up for another U-turn. The Prime Minister invited reporters to Downing Street this afternoon and scrapped one of her key policies that she's championed for months.
It is clear that parts of our mini-budget went further and faster than markets were expecting. So the way we are delivering our mission right now has to change. I have therefore decided to keep the increase in corporation tax that was planned by the previous government. This will raise £18 billion per year.
So a tax policy ditched, and her Chancellor too.
I met the former Chancellor earlier today. I was incredibly sorry to lose him. He is a great friend, and he shares my vision to set this country on the path to growth. Today, I have asked Jeremy Hunt to become the new Chancellor.
And one more thing, government spending will be cut compared to what was expected.
Our public sector will become more efficient to deliver world-class services for the British people. And spending will grow less rapidly than previously planned.
It never rains, but it pours. This was the now former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng making an early dash home from a meeting of finance ministers in Washington last night. A long-haul flight followed by the sack is how his Friday went.
Hi, sir.
Should the Prime Minister go next, Mr Kwarteng?
Hello. Good afternoon.
The formalities look like this. In his letter to the Prime Minister, he wrote, "You have asked me to stand aside as your Chancellor. I have accepted." In reply, Liz Truss wrote that they shared the same vision and, "I'm deeply sorry to lose you from the government."
Congratulations, Mr Chancellor. So nice to see you.
Jeremy Hunt is a former Health Secretary and Foreign Secretary and has tried to become leader himself twice. Now he's the fourth Chancellor of the Exchequer since July. Politics has been on fast forward this autumn. It's 5.5 weeks since Liz Truss became Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, we're at the beginning of a new era, and as we contemplate...
It's 3 weeks since the now former Chancellor set out his planned tax cuts. And less than a fortnight since he ditched the cut for the best paid.
I felt, and the Prime Minister felt, that this was just a distraction on what is a very strong package.
And then, just yesterday, there was this.
And you'll be Chancellor and Liz Truss will be Prime Minister this time next month?
Absolutely 100%. I'm not going anywhere.
Perhaps it's little wonder the Conservatives' political rivals are sounding like this.
Another change in who is running the Treasury, another Tory Chancellor, isn't the answer to the challenges that we face as a country. The Tories are out of ideas, they're out of time. It's time for a Labour government.
This is beyond a joke. It was never funny, but Liz Truss has already, through her own decisions, crashed the economy and heaped misery on people who were already struggling with a cost of living crisis.
And even this former Conservative Chancellor reckons the government is incompetent.
I do not think they can resolve the political damage that has been caused. The Tory party has to be the party of competence in government. I'm afraid we've thrown away years and years of painstaking work.
So many questions for the Prime Minister, but she only asked 4 of us to ask one.
Chris Mason.
Excuse the bluntness, Prime Minister, but given everything that has happened, what credibility do you have to continue governing?
What I've done today is made sure that we have economic stability in this country. Jeremy Hunt, as Chancellor, is somebody who shares my desire for a high-growth, low-tax economy.
The questions from others were in a similar vein and brutal.
He has to go because of the fallout from it. How come you get to stay?
Clearly a difficult day. Can you explain to the public why you think you should remain as Prime Minister?
Will you apologise to your party?
Her answers were similar to the one I got, and then that was it.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Prime Minister, you're out of your depth, aren't you, Prime Minister?
What we've just seen is the Prime Minister junk a central plank of her programme for government, having already junked her Chancellor. What she needs to do is restore credibility with her MPs and with the financial markets. The early evidence is that plenty on her own backbenches are not convinced. All eyes will remain on Liz Truss. To put it at its gentlest, her difficulties are far from over. And the reason for that is the reaction that has arrived on my phone and into my notebook and plenty of others around here in the hours since that news conference. Let me bring you a few of the quotes from Conservative MPs, remember. It was awful. I voted for Liz. Sadly, I think that has hastened her demise. I can't see how she survives. She has trashed our reputation. And at the heart of the grumbles is a sense of hypocrisy and inconsistency. Hypocrisy because she sacked the Chancellor, but she remains in post. Inconsistency because she's got rid of some of her big ideas, and she remains in post. In private tonight, conversations are advancing amongst Conservative MPs about plans to topple her and replace her with someone else.
Chris, for now, thank you. So, the Prime Minister says she still wants to achieve a low tax, high wage, high growth economy, but she has accepted that her mini budget did go faster and further than many had expected. Is a new Chancellor and another major U-turn going to help calm the situation? Our business editor Simon Jack is here.
Thank you, Sophie. Yes, the sequence of events that led to the Chancellor's sacking and another major U-turn on tax policy started on September the 23rd, when Kwasi Kwarteng delivered his not-so-mini budget that contained huge tax cuts with no detail on how they would be paid for and no analysis from the budget watchdog on whether the numbers would add up. In total, he announced £45 billion in unfunded tax cuts. Then came the U-turns. First, abolishing the 45p tax rate for high earners, scrapped, saving £2 billion. Proceeding with a big rise in corporation tax they had planned to scrap, saving £18 billion, and bringing forward the independent budget watchdog report from late November to late October. Now, this is how the financial markets have responded during this time. This shows how much it costs the government to borrow money for the long term. You can see this is the announcement here on the 23rd of December of the mini budget. Interest rates soared. This is when the Bank of England had to intervene to calm down the markets. That intervention, by the way, ends today. So that came down. Interest rates once again began to rise. And here is today. This is the reaction to the government U-turn on corporation tax. So you can see that tonight, borrowing costs are actually higher than they were last night. So business was expecting tax rates to stay frozen to promote growth. Now they're rising from 19% to 25%, as the last Chancellor had planned. So how does business feel about that?
I've been talking to businesses up and down the country in the last few days and today, and they're pretty clear that the first step before they even begin to start investing again is that we have stability in the markets. Now, once that's there, we will as a country have to get back to a discussion about what are the tax policies, what are the regulation policies, what are the immigration policies that will get the country moving again.
And remember, government borrowing costs affect all borrowing, including mortgages. This time last year, a typical £200,000 mortgage would have cost around 2%. Today, that's closer to 6%, meaning an extra £500 a month in mortgage costs. 1.7 million people will see their fixed mortgage deals expire in the next 12 months, and it's ending some people's dreams of owning their own homes.
But with mortgages, it feels like petrol station prices really quick to go up and very slow to come back down. And despite the fact that they've made a U-turn in this budget again, I feel like the damage has already been done. So as an example, for us, we would have to be paying around £700 a month more today than we would have around 3 or 4 weeks ago. And this really makes us have to reassess all of the criteria when it comes to buying our first home, when it comes to location, number of bedrooms, public transport links. So all of that has really gone out the window.
So if Liz Truss was hoping sacking the Chancellor, scrapping an £18 billion worth of tax cuts would instantly restore market faith, she'll be disappointed tonight. Sophie.
Simon, thank you. Well, Liz Truss was voted in as Prime Minister by just over 80,000 Conservative Party members. For many of them and for Conservative voters, the last few weeks have been difficult to watch as the reputation of their party has been battered and bruised. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has been talking to Conservatives in Witney in Oxfordshire.
In the market town of Witney, people were going about their daily business as the drama unfolded in Westminster. And at this town centre coffee shop, talk of political turmoil did filter through. Bob, a lifelong Conservative voter, has lost faith in the Prime Minister, and for him, today's actions didn't help.
I've always voted Conservative, but I will never vote Conservative again.
Why?
Why? Because I just think they're just greedy. Cutting taxes for the rich is just not right. There's a lot of people going to face poverty.
There is concern here about the everyday impact of economic instability on people and businesses. Mike thinks it's too late for Liz Truss to pull it back.
I think she's made so many errors that she's already lost the confidence of the people that she needs, quite honestly.
But for Jackie and Paul, there is frustration at what they see as attempts to undermine the Prime Minister.
They're just out to get rid of her, basically. It's just pressure from all around just to get rid of who's in power at the moment.
Boris should have stayed. I think that's the biggest mistake they made.
In this rural part of Oxfordshire, Witney's long been considered a safe Conservative seat, once the domain of David Cameron. But this deputy chairman of the local party, who didn't back Liz Truss in the leadership contest but was willing to get behind her, is now concerned.
We're the ones that are out knocking on doors, delivering leaflets. We need a stable government.
If, and of course it is still a big if at this stage, if Tory MPs did decide to replace Liz Truss with someone else, how would the members feel about that if they didn't get a say?
Personally, I wouldn't be too bothered about that, but I know a lot of colleagues, would be quite passionate about having that vote. But, that leadership contest was very long. We've got a cost of living crisis, we've got all sorts going on with the economy, it's up and down every day. If we don't change now, we're going to be in opposition for a very long time.
Bit nervous, we just don't know, do we?
For Amanda, who works in a boutique in the town centre, there are nerves about the economy and the uncertainty that brings. But in her view, it's too soon to pass judgment on the Prime Minister.
She came in, she'd only been in not very long, and then the Queen sadly passed away. So she's had quite a lot to contend with, so give her a chance.
While the Prime Minister tries to shore up support for her approach, it is voters who'll ultimately decide if there comes a point when time's up for her party. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Whitney.
So what now? Our political editor Chris Mason is in Westminster. Our economics editor Faisal Islam is in Washington, where the Chancellor was supposed to be today. And Faisal, I think you were supposed to be meeting Kwasi Kwarteng today. Events have rather overtaken that. What does Jeremy Hunt now have to do?
Well, it's been an utterly extraordinary 24 hours, a combination of drama, crisis and, yes, some farce too, epitomised by the extraction of the then-Chancellor who was meeting in there, telling us he was 100% going to stay, the extraction of him across the Atlantic by the Prime Minister and his firing. But we're talking about this corporation tax change as a U-turn. I don't think that quite captures the change, because what you'll understand about corporation tax is that when Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, was trying to win the Conservative Party leadership and join the mini-budget and join the Conservative Party conference, she did not believe that rises in the rate of corporation tax raised any money, because it hits the economy, that it was anti-growth, to use her phrase. Now, in a crisis, in an emergency to persuade the markets, she says that it will raise £67 billion over the next 5 years. That strikes me not just as a U-turn, but the near capitulation of what's become known as Trussonomics. Now, for Jeremy Hunt, the issue is that it's not just that there's damage from that he wants to reverse, that there may be scars that last much longer. And that requires regaining credibility that's lost. And that's a lot more difficult when you've lost it than gaining it in the first place.
And Chris Mason in Westminster, can Liz Truss survive this?
That is the central question, and as Faisal was reflecting on there, credibility is one of the most prized commodities in politics. Hard to gain, very easy to lose, and when it drains away, restoring it can be near on impossible. And that's the situation Liz Truss finds herself in tonight. So she has a new Chancellor who is counting down to the same deadline of this economic statement at the end of the month. That does seem quite a long way off still, given the restive mood amongst Conservative MPs who stare at reality right now and are fatalistic, doom-laden, and fear defeat. Many are convinced of defeat at the next general election as a result of what has happened over the last 5 or so weeks. And so, in that kind of mood, how do they now respond? Do they reflect that they can cobble together by persuasion with the Prime Minister some sort of government that is able to make some sort of progress? Or, and this thought is rising among many Conservative MPs tonight, is it the nuclear option yet again? And the idea of toppling Liz Truss and replacing her with someone else. Not an easy thing to pull off, and it may take a little time, but those conversations very live tonight.
Chris Mason and Faisal Islam, thank you both. Well, it certainly has been a day of fast-moving events. You can keep up to date with what is happening by going to BBC News online. That's bbc.co.uk/news. You can also get there by using the BBC News app. The time is coming up to 6:20. Our top story this evening. The Prime Minister sacks Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor and replaces him with Jeremy Hunt as she makes another major U-turn on her tax-cutting plans. And we'll be looking back at the life of the actor Robbie Coltrane, whose death has been announced this evening at the age of 72.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News Channel, as Wasps wait to find out their fate, we look at the financial crisis engulfing rugby union and what this could mean for the future of the Premiership.
A Around 200 people are reported to have been killed in Iran in the past month during mass protests across the country. These are the faces of some of those who have lost their lives. The BBC has been able to verify the identities of some children and young people. The protests are one of the biggest challenges faced by the Islamic Republic's religious leaders since they seized power more than 40 years ago. The unrest was sparked by the death of this 22-year-old woman, Mahsa Amini. She died while in the custody of Iran's morality police, accused of breaking strict rules on wearing headscarves. Our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, has this special report.
A defiance that's dangerous. Brandishing headscarves, burning them, can get you arrested. Hundreds have been detained. This may seem so ordinary, but even walking without compulsory hijab can have consequences. Dunia Rod, in a white shirt eating breakfast, went to prison after she posted this photo. Across Iran over the past month, there have been unprecedented scenes like this. And this too, schoolgirls ripping photos of Iran's leaders. This defiance spread across society, across generations, on wider issues. And security forces have shot back with tear gas, metal pellets, live fire. One protester who, like most, hides her identity, told us it's no longer just about hijab.
They don't want Islamic Republic with all the violence it's doing, things that they have done politically to us, economically to us, and what they're showing as the face of Iranian to the world. And this is what we do not want it.
Power resides here in the Islamic Republic. The supreme leader, 83-year-old Ayatollah Khamenei, has said little, but he's blaming the West.
These recent matters are not homegrown and spontaneous. It's possible that the enemy used some pretext to pursue their agenda using provocative propaganda.
Wishful thinking. Those who back the government deny the Islamic Republic is at risk or even rattled.
There are very few protests. The country is quiet.
We see them every day, Professor Marandi. That's factually incorrect.
The United States and its allies try to undermine Iran in every possible way. Iran is more open than any of the countries in this region.
But these protests aren't dying down. No one is sure how far they will go. In London, a vigil to mark a month of defiance, to remember 22-year-old Mahsa Amini. Her death sparked this movement.
Protests like this have been happening in cities across the world over the past month. What's happening now in Iran, what happens next, matters in many places. But the course of events inside Iran will be decided there. Lise Doucette, BBC News, London.
A convicted sex offender who killed himself while on the run from police has been named as the prime suspect in the murder of the teenager Leah Croucher. The 19-year-old disappeared in 2019. This week, police discovered human remains in the loft of a house in Milton Keynes. Our Midlands correspondent Phil Mackey is there for us now. Phil.
Yes, Sophie, things have been moving very rapidly with the investigation this week. More than 3.5 years since Leah Croucher disappeared on her way to work. She hasn't been seen or heard from since then, and despite a massive police investigation at the time, no progress had really been made until Monday when there was a tip-off and police came to this house here in Milton Keynes. They very quickly found some of her personal belongings, crucially including the rucksack she was wearing the day she disappeared, and then some human remains. Today we had an update from Thames Valley Police in which they said they now had a suspect, a man called Neil Maxwell. He was a convicted sex offender who at the time of Leah's disappearance was wanted for another sexual assault and was on the run from the police. Crucially, he had keys to this property. He was found, he'd taken his own life a few months later. The post-mortem examination is expected to confirm that it's Leah who disappeared, whose remains have been found here, and a note from her parents was left here last night saying that their darkest fears have now come true. Sophie.
Phil, thank you. The Royal Mail says it will consult on up to 6,000 redundancies as it blamed industrial action for large financial losses. Royal Mail wants union leaders to call off their latest strike action and discuss a deal, but they said that the job cut plans cannot be avoided. The Communication Workers Union said the move was a result of mismanagement and a failed business agenda. The latest COVID infection survey suggests there's been a further increase in cases in the UK. Data from the Office for National Statistics indicates that about 1.7 million people had the virus in the most recent week. Well, that's 1 in 37 people. Everyone in England aged 50 or over is now able to book COVID boosters and flu vaccinations on the NHS. The Rugby League World Cup begins tomorrow in Newcastle when England plays Samoa in what is expected to be one of the most competitive tournaments in its history. For the first time, the men's, women's and wheelchair tournaments will take place simultaneously, with organisers hoping for record ticket sales. Our sports editor Dan Rowan reports.
And there's the Great Britain captain with the...
Half a century's passed since the last British success in Rugby League's showpiece event. Legendary captain Clive Sullivan leading his country to World Cup glory. These days, the 4 home nations have teams of their own. The captain of this year's hosts, England, telling me what victory on home soil would mean.
It's a huge opportunity, I think, for the sport. We've got a great sport and we just want more people to get involved in it. So a World Cup on home soil is the perfect advert, and I think that adds a little bit of pressure to us as a group because you know, nothing will spark interest more than England being successful.
So you pass it and then run round the back. Here at Portico Vine in St Helens, they're already benefiting from the World Cup, a social impact fund attached to the tournament, helping them build a new clubhouse and fueling passion for the game.
I just really like rugby better than football.
It's family to me. They include you in everything, and I'm proud to be here.
Here at clubs like this in St Helens, there's no shortage of excitement ahead of the Rugby League World Cup. But perhaps a true test of this tournament is whether or not it can help grow the sport and engage new audiences beyond its traditional heartland in the north of England.
Men's, women's and wheelchair.
Together for the first time ever.
With 3 tournaments culminating on the same weekend, this is the most inclusive World Cup ever, with 86% of matches staged in the north of the country. Organisers having to contend with a year's delay due to COVID and a cost of living crisis.
Have you sold as many tickets as you hoped? I think the pandemic really affected us. Refunds were really high during the pandemic, but we've gradually built back up. We'll start strongly on Saturday. We haven't sold every seat in every venue, but similar to the Women's Euros, similar to the Commonwealth Games, that we start well, we will build momentum.
Big smiles. 16 teams are in the men's competition, including debutants Jamaica and Greece, but with champions Australia having won 8 of the last 9 World Cups, loosening their grip on the trophy will be no easy task. Dan Rowan, BBC News.
It's been announced tonight that the Harry Potter and Cracker actor Robbie Coltrane has died at the age of 72. David Sillito looks back at his life.
Ain't no one going to get past Fluffy.
Hagrid in Harry Potter, large, fond of a drink, a bit fierce, but blessed with a good heart. J.K. Rowling said only one man could play him, Robbie Coltrane.
Well, I knew that she wanted me to play Hagrid in the film. And then then I heard that she actually imagined me as Hagrid. But, you know, women imagine me all the time, you know.
Sorry, Governor. Apples and pears, tit for tat, I love London town.
Robbie Coltrane was, in the 80s, at the heart of what was then called alternative comedy.
I went down to the video shop yesterday, you know, and I was disgusted.
Political, anti-establishment, a worldview that was for him forged at school. Glenarmond, one of Scotland's most prestigious public schools.
You know, they teach you manners and things like that, and I'm all for that. But they really what they do is they teach you to assume your role in the class system, which is naturally at the top, and alienate you deeply from almost every other sector of the community. Guy just admits to be nuts about you, and you're going out to buy toothpaste.
Anthony McMillan became Robbie Coltrane actor.
Your list of priorities, doesn't it?
I'm going out to get us some. Bye.
Come back here, damn it!
Tutti Frutti showed how good he was.
Don't get the stripy stuff. It stings my gums.
But Cracker was his perfect role.
I owe you an explanation.
Think again.
An apology.
You owe me nothing.
My life's a bit of a mess.
I had a wonderful time, Fitz.
He played the criminal psychologist Fitz, another troubled, heavy drinker with a heart of gold. He won the BAFTA for Best Actor 3 times.
He wouldn't have been able to resist it. He'll have it pinned up on his wall. There are some questions so obvious that nobody ever bothers to ask them.
There were more than a few echoes here of his own carefully guarded private life.
What's your sweet lips?
This is our only chance to go straight.
Look, the killer's not on the dole. You're not up and about at 7:30 if you're unemployed, right?
I terminated my uninterrupted categorization of the...
There was a certain edge to Robbie Coltrane. Big, tough, clever, funny, vulnerable. That's what made him so compelling to watch.
Robbie Coltrane, who has died at the age of 72. Weather now, here is Nick Miller. Hello.
Hi, dodging the downpours to start the weekend. A new area of low pressure will be moving in. We'll be keeping the rainbow lovers happy. But Sunday is a different story. We will find ourselves in a gap between weather systems on Sunday. And that means for many of us, for much of the day, Sunday is looking dry. Out there this evening, there are showers through Wales, Midlands into northern England. These will trickle a little further south through the night. The heavier downpours work into Northern Ireland later this evening, into western Scotland. Some not just heavy, but thundery with a strengthening wind. Ahead of that, in eastern Scotland, a chilly night to come. Temperatures falling close to freezing for a touch of frost. So we start with the heaviest downpours tomorrow. Northern Ireland clearing quickly, move across Scotland, northern England, Wales. There'll be some showers elsewhere in England and Wales. Another batch running into Northern Ireland in the afternoon, then western Scotland. But I talk a lot about showers, and we will see some during the day, but there'll also be several hours of fine and fairly sunny weather as well. Across the UK, things will be turning windier, particularly through the Irish Sea and adjacent coast. Gusts stronger than this, near 50 miles an hour, so there'll be some gales in places. And the lowest temperatures in Scotland, where if you're venturing to the highest hills out of these showers, you may get to see a bit of snow. And clear spells and scattered showers continue as we go through Saturday evening. But then for part 2 of the weekend, one area of low pressure moves away on Sunday before the next one comes at us from the southwest. This is the gap that we find ourselves in. So still windy and showery, especially in Scotland to begin the day, but a lot of these showers are going to fade away. And for many of us, it's a dry day with broken clouds, sunny spells. Keep an eye on this area of low pressure though. The further south and west you are in the UK, it will be turning wetter, more especially into Sunday evening. Umbrellas at the ready for the weekend. You'll need them at times, but absolutely not all the time, Sophie.
Nick, thank you very much. And that is it from us. There'll be more at 10 on today's dramatic events at Westminster. But now on BBC One, it's time to join our teams across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Goodbye.